Cape Town. Well, the Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, of course, today presenting his first midterm budget speech in Parliament this afternoon. For more reaction, we're joined now in the studio by the chair of SAICA's National Tax Committee, Tracy Brophy, COSATU's General Secretary, Bekin Chalinchali, and economist Ian Cruikshanks. Good evening to both of you. Thanks very much for coming through. If I may start with you, Becky, isn't it a bit harsh? He said nothing, he proposed nothing, he offered no hope.
Is the reality of what happened if you look and take everything in total. He said all what we know in terms of the bad things that needed to be done, but he gave no hope in terms of what needed to be done to address those particular concerns. He talks about high unemployment, he talks about the lack of confidence, he talks about the leaking state-owned enterprises. Fair enough to say those particular things, that's what we know. What we expected of him is an indication in terms of all those bad things that are happening, what is coming and what government is thinking, so that we all collectively can prepare what is going to happen in February. Nothing of that sort came into it. There were also some kind of contradictory. Not long time ago, in 2 weeks to 3 weeks time ago, government were singing praises on NDP. Despite the fact that we've been telling that NDP was not creating the jobs that they were dreaming it of, in fact, is worsening. Today, he said clearly indicating that NDP is not creating that job. So clearly, there's no indication. Let's talk about we're not going to meet the revenue that we're targeting, 50 billion. But what is the point of in collecting more if it's going to go down the drain? That's the point that we're making. It's not that we're poor. It's not that we're collecting bad, that what we have, we're wasting it in such an extent that we don't give hope.
So we'll get into the detail of some of the issues you're raising. Tracy, your take?
I think from a SAICA perspective, we've been asking government, definitely for the course of this year, to say, when we have a tax deficit, what do we have, a revenue problem or an expenditure problem? We have been saying we think it's more of an expenditure problem than a revenue problem. And I think, Becky, to your point, this budget is a reflection on where the country is and the economic outlook as to where we're going to go in February. I think, as the Minister said, nothing was sugar-coated today. There was very little good news as well. But if we look at addressing either what do we need to fix this, more revenue or reduced expenditure, I think for the first time there were one or two admissions around responsible spending, failures at state-owned companies. There were, I think, for the first time, some plans actually put on the table. Obviously, the devil is in the detail. Talk around disposing of assets, non-performing assets. I think that's the kind of thing we've been looking to here, because that is a drain. It's an absolute expenditure drain on this economy, state-owned companies that are not performing.
Yeah.
I've got one word to sum it up: disappointing. I'll make it very disappointing. There was nothing concrete, going on what Tracy had said. There was no growth stimulus at all, and that's what it is. There's nothing to reinstore confidence, both for business and for consumer sectors, which he admitted was at rock bottom level. Well, what they're doing is promising to take one good operation, that's Telkom, sell it, and then pour the money down the drain, a drain called SAA or a drain called Eskom. This is not good strategy. It's not good business strategy. And they're not thinking as running a business. They're just thinking of survival. And what is interesting is that yesterday, before this statement, there was one of the lesser ratings agencies, international, but not the size of the big three, who downgraded South Africa. Now, this is going to spread, and we're going to find ourselves in an area where we rapidly head towards what I'll call a debt trap, where we can't afford to pay the interest on our outstanding loans, and then we've got to borrow some more. That's a ticket, to absolute degradation in the economy and no job creation.
But then we all went into today knowing fully well that he had very little, if any, room to maneuver. Let's take the tax. What could he have done? He made it clear that he has no appetite for, increasing taxes.
Interestingly, yes. So in this current economic environment, raising taxes is definitely not optimal. But a statement that was made, and I mean, we discussed it before, if National Treasury estimates stabilising gross debt below 60% to GDP over the next 10 years, they've said it's going to require spending cuts or tax hikes. So there was an acknowledgement in there to say if we are going to get where we need to go, potential tax hikes on the cards. And they quoted 0.8% of GDP. If we look at that stat for, I think it's 2018, 2019, we're looking then to raise about 40 billion once again in an environment where it really is suboptimal to increase your tax rates. But it can be done. There were a few things mentioned in the budget, you know, zero rating of VAT on fuel, things like that. It's not going to get you to exactly where you need to go. It's definitely not going to stimulate the economy, which, you know, but what else do they do if expenditure actually cannot be brought under control?
Peggy, is it not a bit unfair, given the scenario we all knew? I mean, lower tax revenues. We know the mess that the SOEs are in. We knew that, you know, a growth was going to be revised. We know the problem of the government's debt level.
Indeed, indeed we know that. But from the budget that was made in early this year and the 6 months period for the midterm budget, the ministry, not even him, I'm talking about the treasury as a whole, they were expecting to look in depth to those issues. What are the issues that have taken away the confidence of the investors? What are the issues that the rating agent said needed to be addressed? All those issues, none of them has come out quite concretely and said that's what we needed to be doing in dealing with those issues. Even on the issues that we were concerned about, the question of the selling of the telecom main shares, which is a good thing to try to pay the debt. But we are killing the goose that lay the golden eggs. Who next? What are they going to sell next to be able to pay what they are going to do? So they know that the starting point is clean governance. Let's clean the mess in ESCOM. Let's clean the mess in SAA. The billions that we throw in there, of course, somebody was saying, no, there's no money that is being thrown in there. It's the guaranteed. Guarantees are monies that is needed to be there. If you can't pay it, it means that money, you can't use it. It's no more yours. It's the money that you have given to them. Let's do the best thing that we can do. Let's start with clean governance. If we have said it to everybody else, this government is not going to turn a blind eye when the Auditor General says there's billions and billions of money that are not accounted for, and that those people who have been accused of stealing this government money are going to be put in jail. I think it could have given some kind of good governance, is that this minister is saying something differently and he knows what he's going to be doing. Changing the board of ESCOM and without really going in depth and to say if they don't perform accordingly, what are the consequences of those things? We're not going to change this.
And he wasn't clear, Ian, on the conditionalities, was he? That we were giving this money to ASAA or whatever, but on condition they do A, B, and C. We don't know whether there's even a business case for SAA for that matter.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, we all believe that there isn't a business case to be made for them. I think what our best hope would have been to bring a bit of a political slant to it and say, the president is backing me. He didn't say anything like that. So we assume that the president is not backing him, and it's only a matter of time, and he has a relatively short tenure as Minister of Finance, which is also a possibility. And I think that really the investment community, both domestically and globally, are saying, you know, there's nothing new. If there's no change coming, all you're doing is allowing yourself to borrow more in the meantime. You know, that's not helping at all. And I think that at least there was an admission that we've got to do something about business and consumer confidence, but there was nothing to say, look, we're going to rebuild small businesses. We're going to help in that respect to get some sort of economic movement at base level. Until that, if and that happens, then I'm afraid we're going to be stuck in this situation. And I firmly believe that the risk to that 0.6% growth level is to the downside. And there's been some surprising support for that it could well put us back into recession in the first half of next year, and that would automatically lower our international credit rating. I'm afraid it's very likely that's the way we're going.
With the scenario Ian is painting, Malusi Gigaba still needs the money. What do you think he's going to do come February? Because there's not much that he'll be able to do between now and then.
I think this particular budget always sparks speculation in the tax world as to where is the money going to come from, because the deficit never decreases, it's only around the increase. And we've seen personal income tax increases, short-term fix, but there's a shortfall in getting that revenue in, which SARS has already acknowledged. They could look at the medical aid tax credits. That was supposed to fund NHI. They could put that into the pot, but it's a very short-term solution. Using the contingency reserve, he's already admitted that that's the current proposal. So that's where we are in the short term. I mean, going forward, and I know it's absolutely never been on the table, but the VAT rate is the only one that would be the immediate fix across the board, the most regressive choice. But honestly, if they have no other solutions at hand, it might be the only one come February.
Peggy, how does it between now cushion the poor and the working class?
I think to us it has to go back to the basis and include government. There's nothing that if we don't do that, no amount of money we can go and borrow everywhere. We're going just to go to a debt trap. I'm a little bit worried. And in terms of his international visit, what he said to the IMF, what he has said to the World Bank, I'm not going to get news come February that says that they're going to dictate to them and said, if you have to give you money, you have to do more privatization. He indicated in a very slight way and says, look, government has to decide the asset that it needs and the asset that it does not need. And in that context, many things that can be in that loaded statement in dealing with those issues. The issues that if we go to the IMF, we're not going to be different from the rest of the African countries. I think it's going to be bad stories, bad news.
Special thanks to all three of you for coming through. That's where we're going to leave it. Unfortunately, we have indeed run out of time. Special thanks to our guest, and of course, just to throw forward a little, we have an exclusive interview with the newly appointed CEO of South African Airways. That's at 19:30. Stay with Newsnight.
Hello, South Africa. When you vote where you live. And we at the Electoral Commission need to know where that is. Go to elections.org.za to check, confirm, or update your address, even if it's an informal one. And if you know of anyone without internet access, please give them a hand. It is that easy. Let's all contribute to ensuring free and fair elections.
The greatest adventures bring us together with the latest Nissan intelligent mobility technologies